I made 10 more tool holders for my French cleat wall. In my continuing effort to try to clean and organize the new shop, I'm adding some more tool holders to the French cleat wall. I have a lot of stuff around here that needs a permanent home, and my most commonly used tools are all going to be on the cleat wall in close proximity to the new workbench. I thought I would start with something simple. So I made a very basic holder for these spade bits, as well as these plug cutter bits and a couple of countersink bits. This one is super simple. It's just a 2x4 with holes drilled in it for each bit. And then a cleat attached to the back. Now I can just add it to the wall. The shop brush is one of the most commonly used tools. I always try to have it close at hand. So I'm going to make a quick and simple holder for this and put it on the side of the drill docking and charging station. All that I need to do for this one is take a small piece of scrap plywood and cut a U-shape into it so I can hang the brush on it. For that, I'm going to use the scroll saw. The scroll saw has certainly seen better days. It was kept in the old cabinets that used to be in the barn before I built the shop, and after sitting for quite some time in a very humid environment, it's developed a bit of rust. I'm planning to take some time to restore this sometime very soon. For now though, it still works just fine, so I use it to cut out the U-shape in this piece of plywood. After cutting it out, I give it a bit of sanding, and now I can pre-drill a countersunk hole. I put it on top of a scrap piece of 2x4 so I don't put a hole in my new bench. Now I can attach it to the side of the drill station and hang the brush on it. You might notice that my shop brush is actually a car wash brush, but it works great in the shop. Right beside the shop brush holder is a nice new holder for my combination square. The process for this one is very similar to the brush holder. The footage for this one seems to have been corrupted, or perhaps it was user error. But either way, the combo square holder was quite simple. I traced the line of the holder and cut it out with a scroll saw, then just added another block beside it to hold it in place. I think there's still a bit of room on the side of the drill station, and I have just the thing to put there. I have a few of these cheap plastic calipers. They come in handy for quick measurements, as long as I'm not looking for a precision measurement. So I got a bit of scrap plywood and drew the outline of the caliper. Then I cut the plywood down a bit before taking it over to the scroll saw, where I can cut out the two pieces that I need. I'm going to attach these two pieces to the bit of scrap that I had cut away in the previous step. After some sanding, I attach the two pieces, and then I attach it to the side of the drill station. My sanders have been sitting off to the side on the shelf for a while, so now I'm going to make some holders for them. I'll start with the palm sander. For this one, I'm starting with a piece of reclaimed wood from the barn demo. This is a 3/4 inch piece of Douglas fir. And I'm also going to use these two scraps from the shutters on the chicken coop. I'll lay the sander on top of it to get my measurements, then cut my pieces off camera using the miter saw. I'll clamp these together, pre-drill some holes, and then add some screws. Now I have the pieces cut to length, but before I attach these, I want to round the corners. So I use a roll of tape to mark it off and cut it with the scroll saw. Now the same thing, clamp them down and add some screws. Well, that's almost done, but I better put something in the front just to make sure the sander won't easily fall out. I'm just going to glue this one on. Now I can attach the cleat to the back of it and hang it on the wall. The sander fits great, but looking at it now, I think I'll end up going back and round the corners of the piece on the front. I think that'll look better. For the random orbital sander, I'm going to take advantage of this edge on the sanding wheel I think I can build this one out of just one small scrap of 2x6. I'll use the router to cut a rabbet into a couple of small pieces of the 2x6, but these rabbets will have to stop partway into the cut, or the sander will just slide through. On the first one, I set up a stop block on the router and take 2 passes to cut the rabbet. The second one was a little more challenging. Because it's a mirror of the first one, I need to run it in the other direction through the router. It can be a bad idea to run something through the router in that direction, since the spin of the bit wants to kick the wood out away from the fence. So I set up a featherboard to hold it in place, and then set up another stop block. I had to do 2 passes for this one as well, and something that I hadn't thought of is, when you run it through the router in this direction, the wood shavings are pushed out in front of your cut, rather than behind it. And having a stop block there caught all the shavings and prevented the piece from making it to the stop block. So I had to stop a few times and clear away the shavings, so I could push the piece all the way up to the stop block. Eventually I got the job done though, and now I'm ready to attach these 2 pieces to the rest of the 2x6. Then add a cleat and put it up on the wall. At the same time, I also knocked out this quick one to hold the belt sander. I used the same piece of Douglas fir that I used on the palm sander and added a single piece of scrap on the end to strengthen it up a bit. No woodworker has ever had enough clamps, and I have fewer than most, but I do have some, and I wanted to add them to the wall. So I started with some scrap plywood, and after marking out where I wanted to make my cuts, I used the jigsaw to cut out a couple of slots. I clamped it to my workbench, and to avoid accidentally cutting into my bench, I drew a couple of lines to show me where to stop. I would hate to cut into my workbench just a few days after building it. After that, I realized I could have clamped it like this, and made the cuts a little easier. After cutting all that out, I cut some hardwood floor scraps to 45 degrees to use as support, then put it all together. And now I can add it to the wall. I have a number of pliers and clippers and grippers that all need a home. I don't want to make something for each of these, so I came up with something that could hold them all. It started with these 2 pieces. They're the same hardwood flooring scraps that I used from the clamp holder. I'm also going to use this piece of scrap Baltic birch plywood, and this bit of scrap as well. And then just put it all together. That seems to do the job, and there's even room for a few more. When designing anything for the cleat wall, I always try to ensure that it takes up as little space as possible. So for my hammers, I went with this design. I started by cutting some scrap plywood on the table saw. Then, setting up a camera in a bad spot, I cut it to length on the miter saw. I just wanted it to be long enough to span 2 cleats on the wall. I also cut another length for the hammers to rest on. The hammers will sit in some holes that I drilled out with a Forstner bit. I think my drill press is a little underpowered for a Forstner bit of this size. But eventually I got all 3 holes drilled. Now I grab a couple of pieces of scrap to use as side supports. And last, I want to add a little piece at the front, so the hammer's handles are slightly raised up. Hopefully that'll keep them from falling off. I mark out some grooves for the handles to rest in, and then cut them out on the scroll saw. Then give them a quick sanding. attach the cleat to the back. And now I can add it to the wall with the rest. And that's 10 new holders for the cleat wall. And there's still a lot of room left for more. This is really going a long way to getting all my tools organized. There will for sure be more tool holders in the future. But for now, I think I need to do something about all this scrap wood. So my next project will be a mobile wood storage cart. Feel free to subscribe if that's something you're interested in. And thanks for watching.